All right. Hello, everyone.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, how are you guys?
Doing great. So I know it's that time of year where the leaves have already changed, right? And at least where I'm at, so it's getting ready for winter now. I mean, all the leaves are off the trees where I'm at, so now you're in all these sticks are sticking up in the air, and everything is brown, and you're waiting for everything to get covered with snow.
Oh, yeah.
Well, our leaves are very bright and colorful, but then again, I'm on the Front Range, right? So
Yeah.
so there's
Yeah.
still
And holidays,
trees,
and
they're
holidays
starting to
coming
fall.
up. All kinds
Huh?
of holidays coming up. All kinds of holidays and celebrations coming up.
That's right.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that.
That's how they help us survive the cold.
So speaking of holidays, do you where's your family, Jules? Are they in Australia, or are they in the States now?
My sister's here in LA with me, but then everyone else is either in Poland or Australia. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to get back for Christmas in time this year. We'll have to. I doubt it. I'm probably going to wait till like early next year to see what's happening. It's all kind of a murky mess down there. They say one thing, then like 2 days later they say another thing. So it's all like, yeah, it's very difficult and also really expensive to get back right now. It's like $12,000.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
as far as
I love you, Mom, but it's gonna have to wait.
yeah.
$12,000?
Roughly, yeah, like to like the flights, because they've been so they're not filling them up as much as they used to, so they're taking a lot less people. So
But you mean 1,200 though, right? 1,200?
usually, yeah.
Okay, 1,200, yeah.
1,200, okay.
Yeah, normally, but right
Yeah.
now it's just like, it's been wild. And even if I was to fly back, they're in a different state and I can't do a direct flight, so I would have to go through Sydney or Queensland, but then once I'm there I can't get across that state border, so I can't really see them right now anyway. It's just it's a mess, guys. It's
Yeah. I was gonna say, it's like, oh boy, you're flying private jet or 12,000 or first class. That could be.
Yeah, I was like, wow.
No, that's economy. Yeah, so that's a lot of money to be like, kicked in the back of your seat and have no.
I know, yeah. That's me. I try to go for the cheapest seat available. I'm a real frugal. If I can get away with saving $200 on a flight, I'll do it.
He's been known to fly in the luggage department.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, I'll take like a backpack for like 3 months. It's like, just have all my stuff in there if I can save on that. But
yeah, as I was doing a lot of business travel, I used to have massive suitcases at the beginning, and then then eventually I was carrying a backpack like you, Sam. So we just learned how to have the clothes that can be wrinkle free,
Right.
the polyester outfits in business meetings. You can crunkle up and put in your suitcase.
That's right. Hey, Sumit, good to see you.
Sam, hi everyone. Good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Everyone's here.
We were just talking. We were just talking about the holidays. I know we're going to start in 1 minute, but we're just talking about the holidays and the complications of getting all those different places we want to get. So, and I know we just have 1 minute to go, and I don't have the presentation up. So I'm going to pull up that really quick.
Yeah, and speaking of that, the airports are really struggling with their staffing right now. So I'm sure I would expect the airport leadership would be interested in what we talk about when it comes to pay and talent management strategy. Staffing's a real challenge in the airport industry.
For sure. I mean, I was just stuck. I mean, because people are not working right now in the airport. I mean, I got stuck for 3 days just this last week down in Phoenix.
Oh, construction as well. Yes, Daniel, I would say, yeah, I'm having a house built, and my framing kit has been on back order for over a month now. So I don't know, and I think that's, I don't know, the lumber shortages and the staffing shortages.
I heard getting electric panels is also a major challenge.
Mm-hmm. It's
months.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything. Yep. Danielle says the same, that every industry is dealing with these shortages. It's something we can talk about when it comes to compensation today.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour, so let's go ahead and kick things off. I'm going to share my screen here and then turn it over to you, Jules.
Yes, as much as we want to talk about holidays, because that's such a happy time of year, right, guys? We will get started. Thank you, everyone, for hopping on, being on time, and giving us your lovely energy. We do appreciate it. And I want to officially welcome you to another round of the People Strategies Forum. My name is Jules, and I am here to help host and introduce all our speakers. We have an awesome panel. Everyone's here. It's quite the party this morning. And also, if you have any questions that pop up throughout today's session, please make sure to write them in the chat for us. We will definitely get to as many questions as we can, any comments, feedback. And if you happen to be watching from another platform outside of Zoom, still leave those questions. Sam always gets to those at the very end. So we won't forget about you. And also, if you haven't been to one of these sessions before, maybe you're a first timer, to give you a rundown of what we do, you can really think of this like a mastermind where leaders get together. And our mission really is to help teach you how to create workplaces where people will thrive, employers reward, and customers love. So it's all positive here. We try to help you with different speakers each and every week. But today, our main speakers will be Sam and Howard from Comp Team. So changing it up a little bit, we will be talking everything about taking the fear out of paying your team. So we'll be discussing how to structure pay for small businesses and every topic around that. But just to introduce everyone here on the panel, if you're not familiar with them already, we have Shah, and Shah is the founder of Rocky Mountain Health Advocates, but she has a very long history working in HR as well. And we also have Sumit. Sumit works with Comp Team. He works with companies around the world in HR and talent management. And then Howard's back again. So Howard is a pay expert, a consultant with Comp Team. So he works closely with Sam. And then Sam, if you don't know Sam already, I'm sure most of you do, but Sam is the founder and CEO of Comp Team. And Comp Team's mission really is to go into other organizations and help them restructure their talent, their pay strategies, so that they can retain, so that they can even attract as well as retain the best employees. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to you, Sam, because I know we have a lot to cover this morning. And again, guys, feel free to comment and leave your questions in the chat.
Thanks, Jules. So yeah, a lot to talk about today. I mean, we're the approach is basically right now is taking the fear out of pay. And why is it scary is because as small business owners and developing businesses out there, first thing is understanding what to pay people, what is fair, what is too much, what is too little, those types of questions. And then also as we start developing organizations and we start having people performing the same job across the organization, I mean, how do we ensure that their pay is close enough that it identifies their skills and contribution differences, but is also fair compared to regulators that are out there, because we know fair pay is a hot topic right now. Now, we're not going to get into all the nitty-gritty details as far as how to statistically make all this happen and so forth. We're going to keep this high level for those business owners out there, the C-suite professional and those HR practitioners. But we'll take you through the journey as far as establishing a pay practice that's fair and equitable, so that you can ensure that you're paying people without fear and paying them fairly in your organization. So before we get started, I just want to dive in a little bit in with our guest here, Howard. Howard, I've worked with Howard for many years, and we started long ago back in Barclays, where Howard was part of Barclays Capital at the time, and I was with Barclays Global Investors, another arm of the Barclays family, and he was in New York and I was in San Francisco, and occasionally we would cross paths. But so Howard, can you take us through a little bit of your journey as far as how you became a compensation practitioner and so forth?
Kind of an interesting journey, because I actually was a psych major, and I was thinking about becoming a counselor, And then I actually took a course in business and said, oh, how can I apply psychology in the business world? So it kind of put me on a new path. And I went on and got my MBA in management. And while I was pursuing my MBA in management, took a course in compensation, and just everything sort of clicked. I have this analytical background. I had this, right side, left side brain thing going on, and it just all came together. And that's the stories. And ever since, I've done many things in compensation as well as broader HR function. I've been internal. I've been external as a consultant. I was with a software company doing compensation software. So I've seen a lot, and I've been through a lot of ups and downs in the markets. And the only thing I would tell people is that, well, compensation is not a science, and you need to really understand the business. And no matter how people may shout and scream, no one is dying on the table. You just need to pause sometimes and come up with a solution that works both for the business and the employees.
Right. And I think that's a great thing to call out. You were mentioning understanding the people part of the equation versus just the math and the elements of compensation. And that's a great skill set to have, because a lot of compensation practitioners out there can get into the data and are working on spreadsheets and so forth. And we forget that this actually has a huge impact on people. Their livelihoods, how they get paid, how they can afford to send their kids to college or to get food on the table. These things are critical, and getting this right is extremely important. And so that's why we're having this conversation today, is to kind of understand, how do we look at this as a growing company, and as we emerge, how does things change as we go here? So let's just
say also, why the analytics is critical. What's even more critical is being able to tell the story. If you ever want to see a manager's eyes glaze over, put multiple spreadsheets in front of them and tell them, oh, well, the answer is in here, and you'll just lose them immediately.
Right. Yeah, definitely need to make sure that we take them through the journey and how to apply these practices. And it typically starts, the conversation with any particular organization, it starts with around the pay philosophy. So the first question that you want to ask yourself is what do we pay for? And when we are bringing people on the organization, what do we want to pay for? Now, of course, you're probably scratching your head. It's like, well, of course, we're paying for them to do their work and to get their job done and all this kind of stuff. But let's dive in a little bit deeper into that. It's more, do we want to pay for performance, to ensure that we're driving people forward? The higher performance you're driving for the company, the more pay you get. Is that our mindset, or are we looking at it differently? Are we paying for lifestyle? We're trying to attract people to that they bring all their creativity to work. They feel relaxed. They feel like they're really engaged in their work. They're not having to worry about pay, and they're just there having fun and doing and living their best life. So there's different ways that we can frame how we pay for people. There's also other ways. You can look at paying for creativity, paying for customer service, having that great service element. There's a lot of different things that you can do for pay, but I usually divide this into those two big buckets: the pay for performance or pay for that lifestyle element that we're trying to drive for our people. So I'd be interested in Sumit and your thoughts as far as when you're working with companies across the globe. Are there other frames that are pretty common where people pay for certain elements? What are you seeing?
So what I see, Sam, in my part of the world is that fixed compensation is typically the most important component of salary, and a lot of smaller and medium enterprises, they limit the amount of variable comp because employees have this mindset that somebody who's promising a lot of variable comp is just trying to inflate your total compensation package and you will essentially be scammed out of it. And there are organizations that do follow some crazy practices. So even some of the larger supposedly reputed firms, what they do in India is, so if all the stars align, your own performance is out of the park, the company completely destroys its targets and achieves say 150% or something, and your own function does the same. So you end up making about 150 or 160% of your, or maybe 200% of your target bonus. So they put in your total compensation as that amount. So when they make you the offer, they might say that you're getting, you're potentially getting $150,000 with 50 being the variable pay, but in reality, you'll end up making only about 25, even if you've done a fantastic job. So that puts a little bit of distrust in variable pay, and from the employee side, and of course, managers shy away from talking about compensation, and they typically take the easy way out and say, it's the HR folks who made me do it. Even I don't understand compensation too well myself.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing that I've actually seen in the market data too. And so when I talk about market data for everybody out there that's listening, I mean, there's reports that I get access to, or I'm constantly looking in the marketplace for pay trends and so forth. And what Sumit is saying is quite true in certain industries where I can see, when I look at the market data, I'm looking at what the actual pay is for a job and what the target pay is for a particular position. And typically what I find is the actual pay is less than the target pay in a lot of situations. So I find that always surprising that we're going out there, or companies are going out there and they're saying, oh yeah, this is what you can make. And then on average, people are typically making less than that. So I think that's what's driving a lot of current thoughts in the market, as far as right now there's a move where variable pay is going a little bit out of fashion. I'm seeing companies that have either dropped their bonus, and only 5 years ago or so, or 3 years ago, bonus was a big part of the pay equation. Companies were adding those bonus programs in. So it's we are seeing some companies drop that out. I don't think it's a huge alarming trend. If you have a bonus plan, it's not saying that you should just drop it. But there are some smaller companies that are not worrying about the bonus element because of a lot of factors that are going on now in the marketplace, such as we know, everybody's working at home, and some companies are trying to figure out, well, geez, how do we measure performance? We don't know how to measure performance yet in this environment, and so they've kind of taken that off the table until they can figure it out. So, and that's another conversation in a whole. But so what do we pay for? That's quite important to understand. And then, Howard, in your experience, as far as what you've seen, companies, how they're looking at pay philosophy, what other things are they looking at?
I think it's, you really need to define the marketplace that you're in, who you're competing against, what are the critical skills that you need for each of the positions. And then you have to, adapt a philosophy as to where you want to position your pay. There will be some companies that want to be aggressive because they only want the best and the brightest, and they don't want that to be an issue when they're going to the market. So they'll take a more aggressive stance. And then there are other firms who say, well, we have a broader mission, and we're comfortable either paying at the median or below the median. So I think it really means kind of stepping back and knowing who you are, and not just a knee-jerk reaction. Well, if company A is paying this, I have to pay that, because that's not always the best philosophy in terms of working as an individual company.
Yeah, that's right. So understanding your competitors is one piece, and where you want to place yourself compared to your competitors, right?
Correct.
So yeah. So, and when we look at our competitors, it's of course, as business owners, we're thinking about this all the time, but we need to start thinking about, okay, what are they offering their employees? I mean, are they offering their employees? Do they have a bonus in their bonus plan? Do they have? Are they providing them long-term incentives such as equity or stock? What do their benefit packages look like? Do they have some of those cool new benefits that or in the US it's one thing that's funny, so kind of like pet insurance or elder care, or some of these mental health benefits that are quite important after the pandemic. And so some of those pieces are important offerings. Another piece as a differentiator was being able to pay the company helping pay off school loans. I mean, that was a big trend right pre-pandemic when there was a lot of the millennial group were getting PhDs because there's not the job availability out there as there is now, and so they built up large liabilities for school, and so helping them pay off. So the important part is understanding what your competitors are offering and what they're in from a pay standpoint and benefit standpoint and overall rewards. So are they being flexible? Are they allowing their employees to work remotely, a hybrid? And these types of things are quite important. And then also looking into your own demographic and say, okay, knowing that, what are the types of people we're trying to attract? So are we corely attracting those young folks or more seasoned folks?
And companies need to be realistic too. A lot of startups, especially in the tech space, we're competing with Apple and Google, and it's like, really? I mean, that may be aspirational. I mean, that's maybe where you want to get people, but if you're not really bringing people in from those organizations or losing people to those organizations, that may be something that you aspire to eventually, but you need to kind of, have a different lens when you're talking about who's our true competitor group.
Right. That's a good point. So a lot of times when we see that when employers are asking, or when they're saying that we're competing with Googles and Amazons and the Apples and so forth, and they're a small company, I think that they would like to make sure that they're hiring some of that high level talent. Really, how do you compete as a small company with those giants that have the ability to pay more or provide certain types of benefits? And so what I typically challenge them to say is like, okay, well, look at what you can provide that they can't provide as a small employer. And so you have the ability to have anybody that works at a small company often has that direct line of sight on what they're doing on a daily basis and how that impacts the client or the people around you. You can see the lives you change. And if you're a very mission-driven person, that can be very compelling. So it's that's more. You're not a cog in the wheel, as Daniel is mentioning in the chat here. You're an individual. You're not just a person that's hidden or buried among all of those people that are driving something.
And that's why compensation is more than compensation, because when you get into things like this, in terms of who we're competing against, it's really more about, what's the story that you're selling to people? What are people's roles? What are the opportunities for development within the organization? What does the organization offer to support your lifestyle? Mm-hmm. So, that takes us all of a sudden outside of the pure world of base salary and bonuses and long-term awards.
So have you guys seen the advertisement for Amazon recently? It's been all over the news. The Amazon advertisement is essentially showing very diverse populations, individuals that are talking about, I want a company that I can work 2 days a week, or I want a company that I can work nights, or I want a company that's going to help afford, pay for my college tuition. Mm-hmm. And have you guys seen that commercial? And then at the end, they say, well, work for Amazon. So we know that Amazon is kind of taking over everything, right? As far as employer, sadly, as we were talking about small business, we have Amazon out there, the big kahuna, saying that they're going to be extremely flexible. So my thought is, back when I was working for large industry, large corporate America, everything, the agility and the flexibility was very much scrutinized by the higher levels of the organization. And I recall many conversations saying, how can we be more flexible, offering, remote work opportunities? How can we, promote the ability to have flexibility for health, for well-being and family and that type of thing. A lot of resistance. So I would say today, I am not sitting in the big corporate boardrooms anymore, but I would assume that those kind of dialogues are happening, such as the Amazons, to say, what can we do to have more flexibility in the workforce? I, as a small business owner, that's what we talk about all the time. We talk about career mobility, we talk about flexibility, we talk about the fact that we can offer opportunities into the evening as well as the weekends, so that our employees can have other types of positions beyond what we offer, because mainly our company offers part-time hours for full-time pay. But I would say, okay, on the comp side, the thing that's challenging is we want to pay our people so much. And I think, Sam, you recommended to my company that don't pay your people too much, because they get used to that kind of lifestyle, right?
Yeah, and also it's making sure that you're hiring people for the right purpose.
Right.
So Daniel put another thing in the chat here talking about Amazon offering significant sign-on bonuses and so forth. And we've been hearing this about a lot of employers are thinking, oh, we need to offer a $10,000 sign-on bonus or this. And so you just got to think about what that's telling your candidates. One, it's telling them that you're desperate, right? I mean, you need to offer more than what's traditional to be able to get people to apply. And then the next question that those people might have is like, okay, well, why are they desperate? I mean, do people not want to work there? Is it because they're saying that they're flexible and they're offering all these, they're communicating these benefits in their marketing, but is that true? If they am I going to get in there and find a different experience? And is that they're going to be clawing back on that sign-on bonus because I decide that it's not for me and I'm leaving in three months later. So those are things that create that distrust. So as small employers, it's totally critical. It's very critical to be able to communicate your overall value proposition, and then also have those important testimonials from the people that currently work at your company that can validate that. So yes, it's like, I love working here because I can go and be with my family whenever I want to. They have great, they allow us to take these great vacations, or they're flexible with time. There's a lot of reasons why small companies can compete against the giants. So just think about what you can offer. So the next thing that's happening, and of course, when we're talking about pay, and Jocelyn and chat brought this up as far as, how is pay trends changing across the globe now that we've gone through this work at home revolution and remote work, hybrid work, and so forth. And so let's talk about a little bit about that, because that does change and that does have an impact on your compensation philosophy. So when we are, what's happened is, of course, companies have realized that, hey, we can operate effectively with a large at-home workforce. And so they've come to that realization. And so now, as there's companies they're either on two or three different poles. They're saying, hey, everybody come back to work. Or they're saying some people, come back to work, but you can be in the office 3 days a week and you can work remotely. That's hybrid, right? And then there's other companies that are saying that, hey, don't worry about the office. I mean, come in if this is where you can do your best work. But if you want to be at home and stay at home, that's cool too. And so there's a lot of those different offerings out there. So companies have found that if they can hire people not just within their, that live within 50 miles of their workplace, they can hire people that are across the globe or in different states and so forth. And so that's having an impact on pay in the near term. So right now, a lot of companies in the past were paying people to commute into their office. If you are in New York or in San Francisco, where you have to be in traffic and may take a couple of hours out of your life to be able to commute into work, that was part of your pay package. If you're, that is that proposition that, hey, if I work in New York downtown and I have to commute, I can make some bigger bucks to do that, right? That was the trade-off. And so companies such as Google and many others have said, okay, well, if you're going to stay at home, then then we're going to pay you based on your local area. And so that is one trend that's going on. So we're seeing that some companies, that larger companies, are paying based on that geographic area where their remote staff is at. But many small to medium-sized firms are preserving pay, and they're saying, okay, if you work at home, we're not going to reduce your pay, we're going to keep it the same. And then and so that's one, and that's another way people are handling.
Yeah, I just read recently where some employees that are in the office are now complaining that the people that are working from home are earning the same amount of money, and yet they're saving money from not having to commute and purchase lunch, et cetera, et cetera. So it brings up all these new issues that companies never really had to face before.
Right. And so that's becoming we're going to have to see, that's going to level out, of course, as this becomes normal over the next year, maybe 2 years. We'll see how this comes into play. And that's, of course, another large conversation. I think we just talked about that a couple of weeks ago.
Sure.
So if you're interested in hearing more about hybrid pay, definitely look into that previous podcast that we did. So, but anyway, so the other thing that's going on with remote work is we're seeing pay for those gig workers that are in different parts of the world, and some of those lower paid workers in some disadvantaged countries, pay is starting to get lifted a bit in some of those areas, and so we'll probably see over the long term a little bit more or less differentials than we see across the globe today. Well, I think eventually, probably 20 to 30 years from now, we'll see more of global pay trends where we're looking at not so much differentials as we see today, as we become more and more globalized. So some things that we can look forward to later on. But the true reality right now is there's cost of living differences in different parts of the globe. There's cost of labor differences due to the supply and demand of people in different locations that have more talents in certain areas and less talents in others. And so until the world becomes more globalized, and we should expect to see pay differentials across the globe for quite some time in the future. So. All right, so we talked about pay philosophy and basically how do we frame that as a company. So if you're a company out there right now and you're listening in, or a leader of that company, and you're saying, hey, well, can we pay or hire people outside the U.S.? Can we hire somebody that's outside our state? Thinking about that as part of your pay philosophy. So that should be part of your mindset of what you're thinking about, and when you're thinking about the right levels of pay.
And along with that comes needing an understanding of local pay practices and local tax laws. So that you need to take that into account as well when you're operating outside of your country. Right.
And the actual legal right to work in those areas. Right. Yeah, right. Definitely. So the next piece, so once you have your pay philosophy down, or you have an understanding of what you're looking for, the next step is to really dive in and understand the jobs in your company. And so this is called job evaluation. And so as growing companies, what typically happen is that you just think back, if you're a small company out there listening in right now, when you started off hiring your first person, you're like going, geez, I need a person that can do finance and can do HR and some operations. I mean, you're looking at, you're hiring that first person is going to be wearing multiple hats, right? So we call that a hybrid job, a job that they're doing several different things and so forth. But as you grow and you get bigger, and then you start differentiating those jobs more into the traditional job sets, such as we have an accountant now, or that's specifically focused on the accounting work or bookkeeping that needs to be done. We have a controller. We have an HR professional that is helping our people grow and develop. and hire the right people. And so as you evolve, you're developing these jobs. So that's the first thing, is understanding the jobs that you have and documenting those. And as we've all heard about those job descriptions. And also the next step is to take those jobs into categorize them in functions and subfunctions. And the reason why we're doing that is we're starting to develop a sense of career pathing, having that career progression. We're thinking about jobs that are doing similar types of work. And so that as we grow, we can add other functions on and provide more career opportunity for our people. And it'll also help us with better reporting. It'll help us with more consistencies of programs for giving certain people development. That structure as it will start developing over time. But the most important piece of that structure for developing companies is the levels that we put in. So when we look at doing a job evaluation, and we have a person that's in here, we have to say, okay, is that an entry level job, or is that a career job, or is that above a career job to where they're an expert in the field or a specialist? And so understanding where your levels are in the organization for that job, because when you hire your accountant, is that somebody that you're bringing in without experience and that you have to train up, or you're bringing somebody in that's kind of a mid-level that already has experience and so forth, or do you need that top level expert? So that will help understanding where that you need to target pay, because knowing that how much an accountant is paid is one thing, but knowing the difference between an entry level accountant and a seasoned professional is another.
Sam, that sounds pretty challenging to a lot of small organizations, when they think about, job evaluation, leveling, career architecture. How do you take that fear away of like, oh my God, we can't do this. We don't have the time. We don't have the staffing. Are there any tools out there that can facilitate the process?
Yeah, well, there's definitely there's ways to take a systematic or software approach to this. Mm-hmm. And there's others, as of course, you're hiring an expert, and so there's the software elements that are available out there. There's some like Pave is a software for developing companies, and they help you start understanding the different levels. But that's good for certain companies and certain types of industries and in certain stages of development, and then others. You can simply go out to and get a professional off of Upwork or you can hire me. I'm a consultant. So it's but those professionals out there that can help you formulate that strategy and bring that together. And some really seasoned HR professionals. I mean, I know Shar, you have a great understanding of all things HR, and it's not just in your HR training when you're certified by SHRM. You're gonna have understanding and not just how to hire employees, but also develop them, and some elements around compensation and pay and some of the regulations out there. So having a good seasoned HR professional can also help us a growing small business.
Well, I would definitely say working in large industry that I have through majority of my career, and having a full understanding of compensation and job descriptions and job evaluation in my prior corporate world, and then starting my new company and working on the smaller end of things with a CEO and COO, others. It's really hard to jump from a very large organizational perspective of how job descriptions and job evaluations are done, as well as compensation, to jump to a smaller, very small organization. It's just not quite understood. There's not quite a perception about how do you attract and retain good talent, the best quality of talent in a smaller profession, and just throwing money at people, just to run your operation is not always the answer. You definitely need to be in tune to what's happening in the market, and you need to be attuned to what your actual positions are actually requiring your professionals to do. instead of just throwing money at somebody because you think, well, this is my magic bullet. This particular person is going to make us a ton of money. So let's just give them over 100,000 a year. And this individual is going to make it happen. And then in reality, that person's totally priced out of the market, right?
Yeah.
So I could go on and on, but I've learned a little bit the hard way. Having a professional like Sam and comp team has definitely helped me kind of put the guardrails as a chief HR officer of my own organization, and try to educate my senior leadership about the appropriate way to pay and compensate our people. That's not going to be disastrous in the long term.
Yeah.
What I've seen in a lot of small high growth companies is that often they're not focused on it until it becomes a problem, and it's all of a sudden we've grown and our pay practices are all over the place. We're hearing issues from our employees, and it becomes sort of an afterthought, where if they had done some earlier pre-planning and thinking through this, they'd have a more effective strategy in place. But unfortunately, it takes someone to kind of enlighten them and bring that to the table.
Yeah. Well, one small organization, actually it was 500 employees, so mid-level, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. We used to call the CEO the drunken sailor. He was, and seriously, the chief financial officer called him the drunken sailor because the CFO was watching the finances and the CEO was throwing money all over the place. Everything, not only just compensating people willy-nilly, but just artwork in the office and things like that. And it was kind of, at first it was kind of like, oh my gosh, you're calling him that, but it truly ended up looking like that. I think they ended up selling that. I won't say what company it is, but they ended up selling the company. And I think a lot of the selling of the company was because of that kind of nonchalant behavior about compensation and finance in general. And I'm not a finance person, believe me, but I could definitely see irresponsibility in that regard. It would have been helpful to have some expertise in that space. That's
right. Yeah. And that's and I think Mike was mentioning that in the chat here, as far as, money is not always a solution. It can definitely be a Band-Aid in certain situations where if you need to do something quick to shore up a problem. But in the long term, I mean, you could be bringing on the wrong people that are focused too much on the dollar amounts versus where your company is going and the true values that you're trying to represent as a firm. So that's quite important. So we talked about, the job evaluation, understanding the jobs that you need, and the outcome that we need to find out in the job evaluation process is not just about what jobs you currently have in the organization, but you should be looking ahead at least 2 years in the future, saying, okay, what are the future jobs that we need to be able to grow? Because remember, we're trying to be more strategic here and stay away from just throwing money at the problem. And so if we know what we need in the future, the skill sets that we need and the jobs that we need, we can take a more thoughtful approach to building that up our organization over time.
That also leads itself into understanding the talent that you bring in and figuring out how do you develop that talent and where your shortages may be. So, for example, if you're thinking, a few years out is what you need, do we have the bench strength in-house that can move into those roles and then we can, backfill it? Or do we need to go to the market and bring in talent that doesn't exist today?
Right. And so, Sumit, can you tell us a little bit about, I know that hiring from the outside is not always the answer as well. I mean, if we're planning for the future, we want to keep that important talent that has contributed so much to us. I mean, we need to think about development, right?
Absolutely. And I think where most organizations go wrong is when an employee is starting to look out and they convey their decision to start looking. That's when organizations scramble to say, oh, hang on, let's see if we can find your role within. Mm-hmm. I mean, if that's a possibility, why not enable it right from day one when the person is being onboarded? Give them your career architecture model, explain it to them, talk about what kind of opportunities there are. And there's also Deloitte research which talks about how it's much easier to find the same job outside your current organization than to find it inside. And I think that's a huge blow to what we talk about in terms of career mobility. while everyone seems to acknowledge it's important, I don't think we've done enough to make it happen. And the other thing is it gets tagged to compensation, because typically when a person leaves a job and moves to a new organization, they move at a higher compensation package. So whoever's conducting the exit interview, when they ask you, are you getting higher compensation than you were getting here? And you say yes, typically you get tagged as leaving for compensation reasons, which is an incorrect data point.
Right. And so listen to what Sumit's saying is super important. Basically what Sumit, you started off saying was that, when a person starts looking outside the organization, they're already they're dissatisfied, right? There's something that's going on in the organization that makes them dissatisfied. And so you as an employer coming back and saying, hey, we'll offer you more money, or I'll provide this promotion opportunity. I mean, there's already that, well, why didn't you do this before? There's always that sense of distrust. And so you have to, you're behind the 8 ball. And so it's very important for you to be more strategic, looking ahead, talking to your people, understanding what the pressures are.
That was an excellent point, because I remember being internal in an organization, and one of the managers said, oh, I'm losing all my people. They're going to other organizations. They're getting more money. And when we dug into it, yeah, they were getting more money because they were moving into higher level positions that they were skilled for. So this part of the organization was doing a great job of hiring young people, training them, but they weren't promoting them fast enough. So now you got these fully trained people ready for the next move, and they felt like they were being held back. So the easy answer was, oh, we're not paying enough. Look what they're getting in other organizations. And then when you sort of dug into it, it was like, yeah, they're getting more money because they're moving into higher level positions. So you need to start moving your people, a little bit faster.
And the other aspect of that also is that if you do have somebody who's a star performer and they're trying to leave, and you say, hang on, we'll give you more money, we'll give you career opportunities, you're telling the rest of your population that that's the only way we'll listen to you. So unless you go about rattling the cages here, nothing's going to happen, which sets completely the wrong example. And in fact, we did some research while I was at Aon, and we were working with a company that was a casino in the US. I think it was in Vegas, where else? And they found that simply increasing the salaries of people who were below the median to somewhere close to the median, it helped boost retention by a few percentage points. So compensation has to be fair. You don't really have to break the bank to retain your people, as long as you can explain what kind of opportunities exist and what's the total workforce experience that you're getting, not only compensation. So what's the culture, what kind of opportunities, who are you working with, what are you learning? And I mean, I think compensation is absolutely critical. You've got bills to pay, you've got loans to pay off, and lots of other things. But it's not the end of the world by itself.
Right. And so let's back up a little bit and talk about what we've discussed so far. We talked about defining the compensation philosophy, and we've moved into the job evaluation piece. And I want to point out that the purpose of the job evaluation piece is to understand we need to know about our jobs, but how do we value those jobs internally too? So there's jobs that are more important to us than other positions in the organization. We need to understand that lineage, and so we know where to invest in positions. So you could say that, okay, it's really important for our company to have a great customer experience. And so you may say that we value those customer interfacing jobs at higher than those that are not interfacing. And so that might be a way that we're looking at our strategy in our internal positions. But that's not saying that those other jobs aren't important, right? We need all our people to run the organization in one way or the other, but we're just talking about those that we need to invest in more in certain elements. So those strategic positions. So that some of that internal job evaluation is to determine that internal hierarchy of those positions. Some jobs just require entry level talent, some that we need a super expert in, that we need to pay higher for that expertise. So knowing that internal evaluation is important. So the next step from this is we're going from our internal valuation, and then we're going to do a market study. We're going to look at jobs, the jobs that we have internally in our company, and seeing what the market pays for them. And so part of this, as we discussed before, we need to know who our competitors are. We need to understand their practices. We need to understand the types of people they're trying to acquire to work at their company. And then and we need to understand the differences between what they're offering their executive staff and those that are non-executives, what in different areas. So knowing your competitors is quite important. And so this is what surveys can do for you. So there's different market surveys out there. So in the technology world, there's surveys such as, Aon Radford, or I guess they're Towers now. And then we have, Culpeper, and there's other surveys from Mercer, and we said Towers Watson, and a variety of sources out there. So some are more expensive than others, and so knowing what you're getting is quite important. A lot of small companies are relying on free sources. They're going to Glassdoor or Salary.com, or looking at LinkedIn for pay references, or they're simply looking at some of the new pay, the offers, what competitors are offering, or what the pay range that they're putting in their offer as a point. So those free sources are the data is not considered very high quality. Of course, it's not statistic. It's not based on. It's important for you as an employer to know where you're hiring the job. Am I hiring it to be in the office? Am I hiring it to be in Singapore or the Philippines or in China or in West Virginia? So wherever you're looking at hiring, all those areas have of a different rate that they're hiring in those locations because of the cost of living and the cost of labor in that location. The next is, some of those depend on the size of company. So, those very large companies are going to pay a different rate than the smallest companies that are out there for different types of jobs. And so that's important to be understood as well. And those free sources don't really collect that information. And so that's the big problem. You can end up paying, plus or minus 20% of what the actual rate is by relying too much on free data. So it's important for us to really look at, how many people in our organization. If you're hiring one or two in your organization, you can be off on pay, or you can pay more what they're asking for in the marketplace. But if you're hiring hundreds of people or 50, then you need to be more careful, because that, being off can cost your company millions and millions of dollars, right? So it's important to understand the scope in which you're working in.
It's also good to look at multiple reliable sources of information, not just hang everything on one survey, because there are nuances in each survey, and it's good to sort of understand what those are and then try and figure out where you want to position yourself.
Mm-hmm. Right. So those small companies out there that don't have a budget for pay data, or they're looking for some more quality information, they can use some of there's companies out there such as we mentioned Pave earlier, that allows free participation in exchange for data. There's also Option Impact that is a great source for free information. As long as you provide your data to them, they'll share that information back. So if you're a growing company and in those early stages, those are great sources, better than free sources. And then as you start to develop and you need to have more competitive data that companies are in, you have to just think, companies that are willing to pay for data are paying because they're getting higher quality data back. And so this is sources that are based on statistical methods and are going to be defensible in the marketplace. And so those are like those survey companies I mentioned, you know, the Aons, the Towers Watson, the Culpeper, all those types of companies will provide that type of higher quality information. But you can also get other sources from your trade organizations. If you're a nonprofit, there's many of those surveys out there that are inexpensive that you can get. And so forth. And so once we have all this information, you basically are looking at what your jobs are paid, and then you want to do that match. Your internal jobs and that external market data, you're putting it together to see where your people are paid. Are we on average, are we paid above the market is paying, or are we paying below the market? And that'll give you a sense of where you need to adjust your pay policy. So in situations where it may be okay to pay below the market, is when say, okay, we can afford to pay at maybe the 40th percentile because we're investing a lot of money in our employees in these additional benefits or these work-life balance initiatives that we have. And so you're investing in your employees in other ways that are more meaningful to them than just the dollar component.
And
then
same way when you have single incumbent roles or special roles that may be, vary from the market, that's where you need to, add some common sense as to saying, well, our positions are either lighter or heavier than the market descriptions, and you may need to adjust the survey data to fit your role.
That's right. And then, of course, the large outcome of all of this is to ensure that we're establishing a fair pay policy in our organization. So we've done the work to first identify, what our pay philosophy is. What do we want to pay for? We've evaluated our jobs in our organization, and we're looking out 2 years to determine what jobs we need in the future, so we're not caught off guard. And then we've done the market study to understand what these jobs need to be paid in the marketplace. And we've put this together to determine what our pay ranges are for the future, so that we can ensure that we're paying people within a competitive range. They don't have to worry about how much they're being paid. That they don't have to question about, is this fair or not, because you've put in the rigor and you've communicated to your employees, so they can focus on doing their best work instead of worrying about, is my employer actually going through the hoops to ensure that I'm paid fairly in the market. So that's all quite important. So Sumit, as far as communicating this effectively to employees, what are companies doing out there to ensure that their employees know that they're being paid fairly?
A lot of different things, Sam. So there's no clear roadmap. In fact, I was reading this morning that there's a big debate on an open salary policy where people are debating whether it's a good idea to be more transparent about what everyone's getting paid or not. And interestingly, there was a survey conducted in the Indian industry about this, and 61% people seem to feel it's a terrible idea because they say it'll increase confusion. And when you break up the survey results, so it seems the boomers think it's a bad idea, the millennials think it's a great idea. So there's a clear division around that. But overall, I think managers tend to shy away from the compensation discussion altogether. It's always easy to say HR uses some algorithm, they come up with various increases. Even I'm not happy with my salary increase or with how I'm being paid. So there's not much I can do. But some of it is definitely changing. So managers are becoming a little more smart in terms of handling pay questions, and organizations are encouraging them to talk about pay ranges and quartiles and the logic of how your merit increase happens, when you're a new hire, you're being slotted into the right quartile for your kind of skills and experience. So I think people are realizing how compensation is. Although I'm pretty sure if you were to do a survey, more than 90% people would say they're being underpaid.
Sure. Yeah.
A lot of it has to do with, you can have the most analytical, precise program in the world, but if it's all done behind the curtain and people don't understand the basic philosophy that we talked about, and they don't understand how their pay is established and what their opportunities are. It's all for naught. So there's so much that is dependent on just, transparency and open communication. And it doesn't have to be, here's how everyone's paid, but it could be just sort of education as to how are our pay structures determined and how our pay range is set. So it's just being a little bit more open and more communicative.
Yeah, right. And to the extent that people understand how they're being paid and how it's set, the more satisfied they're going to be with their pay and the transparency of pay in the organization. So one of the biggest threats to the lack of transparency and understanding is typically around equity pay, long-term incentives. If I have stock in the organization, what does that mean? How much is it worth? A lot of private companies, they don't do a great job of explaining this because it's hard to put valuation on the company at any particular point. Public companies, they have a great advantage because somebody just needs to look at the stock market and say, oh, this is how much the company is paying per share, and so they understand. So, as a small employer, as a non-public employer, you have an extra duty of care to ensure that your people understand what their pay is worth, or they're going to just completely discount it and say, well, I don't know what it is. It's either going to make me a millionaire someday, or it's going to be worth absolutely nothing. and if you're paying a lot of money for that program, that equity program, you're wasting it if you're not communicating good valuation or what the value of that particular component can be in the future. But I know if there's any lawyers listening in, I know there's a lot of difficulty around doing that effectively, but that's just the reality. Otherwise, if you don't tell people value, they don't know how much it's worth. Great. So I know we've talked about a lot of things here, but we are coming to the top of the hour, and I just want to acknowledge our sponsor. And of course, we strongly believe in the TMA method here. And the TMA method is a way for us to understand a little bit more about our employees' preferences for work. What are they looking for in the workplace? Are they looking for that flexibility that we mentioned earlier? Are they looking for so that career progression? The TMA method is one of the first steps that you would do as providing an assessment to your people to understand what they're looking for and how they like to work in your company. And so this is a great foundation for career architecture, and which brings us to our next speaker for next week, with Linda Janak out of Talent Guard. She is the CEO of Talent Guard, which it's a software that focuses on creating career paths for your organization. And so this is a pretty handy software because, as you know, there's if you've ever tried to create career paths, as we mentioned through that job evaluation process, that's the first step of understanding your jobs, but then putting them in a format to where you can clearly articulate what are the next step in an organization. The TMA method can help identify whether the competencies around each of those positions, and also the Talent Guard can do the same. But Talent Guard does that more on a formulaic basis. And Linda's going to talk to us about how her tool interfaces with the external market to keep that up to date on a regular throughout the year and as the jobs evolve. So come join us next week for our conversation with Linda. It's going to be great. All right. So is there any questions, Jules, that we missed that we need to catch up on in the chat there?
I don't think we had any. Well, actually, Sumit kind of touched on it, but maybe you or Howard might have some extra thoughts. Daniel asked, has the annual cost of living increase gone to the wayside?
Oh, so cost of living, that's very interesting. So the cost of living is more important in certain industries and organizational structures than others. So let's say if you have labor unions and so forth, a lot of that is centered around increases are centered around the cost of living. Now, if you look at the overall globe and what's happening right now, cost of living is more important in certain areas than others. And it's usually tied to inflation, of course. In the US, we're experiencing more inflation that we've experienced in decades. And so we're seeing an increase in the cost of living. And so that it's important that we consider that when we're thinking about future pay levels, because the cost of labor or the amount that we pay people internally at companies, cost of living is built into that number. It's a lagging factor. It usually takes about a year for cost of living to get into the cost of labor. But if you were in a high inflationary environment, you should expect the cost of labor to slowly creep up as well over the next year or so. So it is still built into how we pay people. It's just that the cost of labor is definitely a more superior measure of how much we should pay, because it also takes into consideration the supply and demand of certain jobs out there. So let's just say the cost of labor floats all boats up. But if you have if the area that you're trying to hire a person and only has so many software engineers, then that job is going to be paid much higher than the cost of living in that particular area. So it's an important factor, but the cost of labor trumps the cost of living, and is a factor to look at. And I can go into more detail on here as far as we look at cost of labor across the world. But the truth is, if you are taking a data point, or let's say San Francisco pay levels, and you're trying to forecast what pay is going to be in Argentina or China or whatever, based on the cost of living differential from San Francisco levels, it's a very perilous road. You really need to understand the local pay pressures to do that effectively. If you're trying to simplify your practices by using cost of labor and your San Francisco data or wherever you might be to determine pay elsewhere, you could be off the market by up to more than 20%. So it's okay if you're hiring one person, like I said, but if you're going to hire 10 or 20, you could be way over the market and actually be causing damage to the internal market of pay in that location. So a lot of stuff to be thinking about there.
I mean, I feel like, I don't know how like anyone else feels, like our viewers, if you want to see more of this, if you want to talk more about pay, because it is such a in-depth discussion, it's so hard to cover so much in 45 minutes or 50 minutes. So if you do want to see more of this, let us know in the chat so we can cater some more sessions. But yeah, thank you, Howard, Sumit, Shah, Sam. Wonderful discussion today. Hope everyone enjoyed it.
Yes, absolutely. And everybody, looking forward to see you next week at the People Strategy Forum. Take care.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Bye all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.